There's a 5-year window around retirement that has more impact on your long-term plan than almost anything else. And most people don't realize how important it is until they're already in it. Now, if we haven't met yet, I'm Ryan Kravitz. I'm a certified financial planner, and I help people transition into retirement and turn their savings into a reliable income plan. When people think about retirement planning, they usually focus on one big question: do I have enough? And that's an important question, but it's not the only one that matters, because I've seen people with very similar numbers end up with very different outcomes. And a lot of that comes down to what happens in this window. So when I say the 5-year retirement window, I'm talking about the period a few years before you retire and the first few years after you stop working. And what makes this window so important is that a lot of key decisions and risks start to overlap right here, not spread out over decades, but concentrated into a relatively short period of time. This is when things like how you start taking income and when you claim Social Security and how your investments are positioned and how you manage taxes and how you handle healthcare before Medicare all start to come into play. And the challenge is that those decisions don't happen in isolation. They interact with each other. I mean, a decision that you make in one area can create consequences somewhere else, sometimes immediately, sometimes years later. I mean, I had someone recently who was getting ready to retire, and on paper, everything looked solid. I mean, they had saved well, their projections worked, there wasn't anything obviously wrong. But when we started walking through what those first few years would actually look like, how income would come in and how much they'd need to withdraw and how taxes would show up, that's when things got more complicated than they expected. And it wasn't because their plan didn't work, but because the timing of everything started to matter. And I've also seen the opposite. Someone with a very similar situation, similar savings, similar lifestyle, but who approach those early years a little differently. Instead of just asking, will this work? They focus on, okay, how do we want this to work? Where income would come from first, how much flexibility they wanted to keep, which decisions mattered most to them early on. And in that case, the experience felt completely different. I mean, not perfect, but more stable, more intentional. And that difference doesn't come from having more money. It comes from how those early years are handled. Because here's what tends to happen if that window isn't thought through carefully. Let's say someone retires and just starts pulling income without really giving a lot of thought to it. They take withdrawals from their accounts as needed. They react to expenses as they come up. And they make decisions one at a time. And again, nothing feels obviously wrong, but over time, those decisions start to layer on top of each other. Withdrawals might be a little higher than they expected. Taxes might be a little less efficient. Healthcare costs might be a little higher than they planned. And none of those things on their own seem like a big deal, but together they start to create pressure. And that pressure doesn't always show up right away. I mean, sometimes it takes a few years, but by the time it becomes noticeable, you've already moved past the point where the biggest adjustments could have been made. I mean, on the flip side, when this window is handled more intentionally, you often see a very different experience. I mean, income is structured more thoughtfully. Decisions are made with awareness of how they interact. There's more flexibility built into the plan. And even when things don't go perfectly, because they won't, that we know, it still feels more manageable. There's also another factor here that makes this window especially important, and that's uncertainty. Because in the early years of retirement, you don't yet know how things are going to play out. I mean, markets could be strong or they could be volatile, or expenses might be predictable or they might not be. And when you combine that uncertainty with important decisions happening at the same time, I mean, that's where this window really starts to matter, because this is also where something called sequence of returns risk comes into play, which is just a way of saying the order in which market returns happen over time. And if markets are strong early in retirement, it gives your plan more flexibility. But if markets are weak early on and you're taking withdrawals at the same time, then that can have a much bigger long-term impact than people expect. And again, this isn't something that plays out over time. It happens early. I mean, this is one of those areas where retirement isn't just about how much you have saved. It's about how you navigate this transition. Because once you move past this window, I mean, a lot of the major decisions have already been made. I mean, your income structure is more established. Your strategy is more set, which means that the early years carry more weight. So if you're approaching retirement, or if you're within a few years of it, I mean, this is the time now to slow down and be more intentional. Not just about whether the plan works, but about how those decisions are being made. Because small adjustments during this window can make a meaningful difference over time. And once you understand that, retirement starts to feel like less of a leap and more like a transition that you can comfortably manage. So when you think about retirement planning, don't just think in terms of, do I have enough? Also think about, how am I going to navigate those first few years? Because that window, it often ends up having a much bigger impact than most people expect. I hope you found this helpful. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.